Welcome to the YoggNation, the Spirit of Gratitude podcast on the Integration platform. Hello, friends. My name is Yogesh Patel, and this podcast focuses on bullying, self-awareness, and our inner spirit, inviting high-profile guests to share their experiences on these relevant topics. And today, my next guest is Keith Fitz-Gerald, one of the most recognizable media personalities on Wall Street today. He's a regular contributor on Fox Business and CNBC, in total delivering over 3,000 primetime appearances, including the outfits of the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Forbes, BBC, Dubai One, just to name a few. He shares his sharp insights and investment strategies that have guided investors worldwide from his popular newsletter, 5 on Fitz. And folks, it's well written and easy to understand. And in full disclosure, I'm a subscriber. But who is he beyond the finance world? This episode pulls back the curtain on the man behind the market predictions. With gratitude, welcome to the podcast, Keith.
Thank you so much for having me. What an honor, because I don't get out and get a chance to talk about this stuff very often. And it's super powerful and super important if you want to be successful, in my opinion.
Absolutely. The word gratitude, Keith, how and why is this a subject that resonates with you so deeply?
Well, it resonates with me for a couple different reasons. Number one, I'm not the smartest guy in the bunch, and I never will be. So I'm extremely thankful every single day I open my eyes. I'm very thankful for the world we live in. I'm very thankful for the world that we can leave behind. I've spent 30 some odd years in Asia at this point. I have a very different outlook than most Westerners. I don't view life as A to B. I view life as a continuum. And we go around, and our job is not necessarily to know where we lead or where we go or why, but to put one foot in front of the other and to live as best we can.
Where does this inner spirit come from?
That's hard to say because it's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. And I can't tell you why, I can't tell you how, but my grandmother, Mimi, Virginia Mimi Gruner is what we called her. She was widowed at a very young age, left with a very small life insurance policy, and she became a global investor in her own right. Now, when I was 13 or 14 years old, my parents had just divorced. It was a rough space to be in, right? And, I used to sit down with her every Sunday afternoon, and I had to learn how to make martinis because that was her favorite drink, and we were going to talk about the markets and the world. But, she made it very pointed, a very sharp point in my mind. Look, you can sit back and you say, woe is me, and this is tough, and boy, these are all hard places. Or you can go out and you can make the world what you want it to be. And that's, I suppose, if I really think about it, where this comes from, because I've always been driven by what's around the next corner. How can I do this? What neat people am I going to meet along the way? How can I shape the world in the image that I want to see it and leave it a better place? It's never been a question of negativity. The question is, what can I accomplish today? So gratitude for me is something that pervades every molecule of my body, not because it was forced there, but because somehow it's lodged there, and I've never left that path.
Do you have any patterns of how you practice gratitude?
Oh yeah. I mean, every single day I start with a smile and I end with a smile. I'm just, it sounds really trite and really simple, but the world is such an exciting place with such interesting, dynamic people and new things to discover. Ever since I was a kid, I didn't sleep very much because I couldn't wait to be awake and see what's out there and to do all this stuff. So, to me, I try to start every single day with a few minutes of quiet. I put a smile on my face. I think about all the things that could go right, not all this stuff that could go wrong. I think, what can I do today to make a difference in somebody's life? How can I work with my wife? How can I give her a hello? How can I communicate the love to our children? How can I share that with the world around me? These are all questions that, I think about the very first moment I wake up. And then before bed, the last moment before I shut my eyes, I ask myself, did I manage to get those things done? Did I make a difference in somebody's life? Did I make that happen? Was I thankful? Did I, act appropriately? Did I encourage others to do the same thing? And if I can start each day and finish each day that way with just a simple few minutes of quiet reflection, nothing fancy, then I know I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Where does breathing come in?
Breathing is something that I learned in the martial arts. It's to hear some people talk about it, okay, you've got to calm yourself, or you've got to take in oxygen, or you've got to do this. To me, it's the rhythm of life. In early on in my martial arts experience, I encountered some Zen, I encountered, lots of other influences, but the idea of breathing and meditation, while I am terrible at it, I try to, again, collect myself for a few minutes every single day to center who I am as a person and what I'm trying to accomplish in life. And I find, over the, gosh, at this point, 30 some odd years I've been doing this, that it helps a lot. Again, it sounds very simple, it sounds very goofy, and it doesn't matter where you're coming from, what walk of life you are, what you do, but if you can take that few minutes and just be thankful for what it is, what it represents, and what you might get done, I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, within my student creed, and it kind of echoes everything that you just shared, our student creed when I was a martial artist, didn't quite get the black belt, but I got to Pluma 2. Started as a white belt at the age of 40, stopped at 44. Couldn't get over that hump in terms of doing those darn push-ups. But nonetheless, the student creed that we had, Keith, was I discipline myself to achieve wisdom, strength, and integrity. I honor the responsibility of my rank and use it to support my family and my community. I lead by example and encourage fellowship and growth within the academy. UAMA United We Stand, and then the Kia.
Oh, absolutely. And, and that's, there's something in that creed that's unique. And the reason, we recite that as martial artists or something similar to that is that the integrity and the responsibility for your own actions, I think in today's world are missing. And they're missing from a lot of people, not necessarily because they want to, but maybe just because they weren't raised that way or they don't know any better. So, in our world, with the tens of thousands of people that we work with around the world every single year, if we can establish that in their lives, that concept of, hey, you can do this, but it starts with looking at the person in the mirror and taking responsibility for that person, suddenly you have an entirely different animal on your hands. You go from negative and fear to positive and confidence. And you can get anything done when you're confident. And, and again, that it's just proof positive that if you're motivated, if you're thankful, if you are expressing gratitude, if you're looking forward to doing all of those things, sooner or later, you're going to start doing all those things. It's pretty cool.
But the world is unfair in the sense that there are not enough role models, mentors in a child's upbringing that can hear this type of positive messaging. So I'm curious, Keith, for the person that's listening in the quiet corner of the room, what would you be able to share?
Don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to tell somebody, hey, that's really interesting. Can you explain something to me about that? Can I learn from you? The most interesting connections I've made in my life oftentimes have been completely random. Somebody who I dreamed never would have talked to me in a million years suddenly says, oh yeah, Keith, let me tell you about that. And, or it just starts from, that inner confidence. And a lot of people are like church mice. They sit in the corner. Oh, I don't know.
Wait, I'm sorry, church mice?
Yeah, they just kind of sit in the corner, they're quiet. They're just watching, and if you can draw that person out, give them a little bit of an encouragement, maybe sometimes a little push, into the center of the room, suddenly they blossom. And, again, I was very much like that. I was not, again, I wasn't part of the cool kids. I was king of the nerd herd growing up. But when I began to, through my, my grandmother Mimi, establish my own presence and sort of figure out that going out into the world was the way I was going to make the world my own, all of a sudden the world changed. And I mean, it was just like, poof, it just locked into place, and I've never left that path.
But the world has changed because of technology and how pervasive social media is. I think that's part of the challenge that society faces in terms of generationally. Yes, these kids are smarter, but they're more insular. And so how would you perhaps get them to come out of their shell or to, I don't know, have more messaging as you just shared?
Well, this is very controversial, but the first thing I'm going to do is tell them to put down the dang phone. Put down the screen. Go have a real conversation. Sit next to somebody sit down to somebody on a park bench. I mean, studies are increasingly showing that the internet is making us dumber. It's making us more antisocial, and it's making us less willing to have an engaging discussion, to explore differing opinion. And, that to me is sad, because I think the world would be a very different and far more calm, more pleasant, more accepting place if more people just had real conversations. So, one of the things I like to do, personally, and I still like to do this today, is my wife and I will often go get a simple picnic lunch in Japan from 7-Eleven. We'll go sit on the riverbank and just talk to whoever shows up, or we'll go to a city park and just
Random.
yeah, and just, how are you today? I mean, there's nothing I like better than being in a foreign country and sitting down and going, how are you today?
I would think that'd be nerve-wracking because if you don't, well, it depends on if you know the language.
Well, even if you don't know the language, people are people. And if you put your shoes on the same way, sooner or later, and you treat them with respect, you know what? That's what you're going to get back. And, maybe I'm naive, but I really believe that. And I've traveled widely during the course of my career. And what I find is people are people. And if you engage with a smile and thankfulness and have fun, sooner or later, that's exactly what's going to happen. And I've been invited into people's homes, even though I don't speak the language. I've, shown up on my motorcycle and I've had a breakdown. I've been given gas and this, and we never spoke a word of the same language, or, things that, again, shouldn't have happened, but did. And I look back at it all these years later, and I firmly believe that it's because I was respectful and I was engaging and I was genuinely looking for the human connection that those things happened.
But I think part of the reservation that perhaps today's society has is the internal stresses that they carry. They cannot outwardly show it. I mean, especially when it comes to, money and money management. I mean, Keith, you're central to this. And I wanted to get your perspective in terms of what can you say to that individual who, perhaps is struggling with money. I mean, just that person living the paycheck to paycheck, having to pay bills, being behind on their rent, their credit cards. It's unfair. I understand. What could you do to help that individual?
Well, it's a tough spot, and I won't deny that. I mean, it's just it is a tough spot. There's just no easy way around it. And when I started my companies, I was living paycheck to paycheck, and I've been there, done that.
So you did stress, you did worry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. There's no question about it. But again, there comes a point where and I've got to preface this by saying, today I believe, based on my own experience, that anybody can be wildly successful with money with the right knowledge, the right training, and the right mental attitude. Now, training doesn't even have to be formal, but the attitude, it's got to be there, and you've got to be focused. And that first step is terrifying because maybe you are living paycheck to paycheck, or maybe you don't are stressed, or maybe you are behind on your rent. But there's always a path forward, and how you define it, what it looks like. It may not be exactly what you want. You don't get to buy the Rolex next week. You don't get to be vice president of the company afterwards. You don't get to have $1 gazillion right away. But again, to my experience, I believe if you take those little bitty steps, that very first step is the hardest of, okay, I've got to take the bull by the horns. I've got to address this. Maybe I stop buying Starbucks. Maybe I stop doing the fancy phones. Maybe I stop doing all these other things, because there's always a way forward if you want it. And, it doesn't matter whether you're coming from a place of wealth, a place of poverty. It doesn't matter whether you're coming from a little, a lot, your age.
It doesn't matter. And when it comes to this,
I don't believe it does. I mean, people say it does, but, I'm of the belief that your future is what you make of it. And, yeah, some people are dealt a bad card. There's just no doubt about it. But if you make it a bright future, and that is your conscious decision from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, I believe you absolutely can do this.
But that leads me to my next question. I mean, how does self-awareness influence the way we invest and manage our money?
Well, I think that that's an interesting question, and I'm not sure I have a perfect answer to this, but it comes down to, what do you want to accomplish? So much of our world, particularly social media, is designed to engender likes or a similarity, or, I'm going to go over here because there's 5,000 people that like this, or oh, I want to be here and there. I forget that. Who are you? Look in the mirror. There's only one person, unless you got a really interesting mirror, there's only one person looking back at you, right? And that's the person you got to come to terms with. And so if you can get the person in the mirror under control, and you get the person in the mirror believing in your vision, then suddenly it gets a lot easier, and I don't sweat a lot of the small stuff. I never have, because I always believed in the person in the mirror.
Sweating the small stuff, I think that's what holds people back, because I believe that with all of the knowledge, with all the training, if it doesn't affect your heart, that spiritual earthquake in your soul, it's not going to make a difference. It has to be so meaningful, so powerful to you. And I happen to believe that, just again, on the subject of finance and money, as a lot of people do happen to worry about stress and in this regard, you can't be the best version of yourself with this hanging over you. This being that 800-pound elephant that is the bills, the mortgage, the car payments, student loans, and what have you. I think that's what perhaps holds people back from taking that step. And I would have to imagine that it is frightening. It's like,
it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. I mean, and again, I've been there. I didn't know where my next paycheck or my next dollar was coming from, and my wife and I we had our first son, and it's like we're starting our companies, and we got down to $1,000 in the checking account, and it's like, okay, that was our goal. It's like, here we go. What are we going to do? And then that's when we got our first sort of publishing contract. Right? And it's scary, but if you understand there's a path forward, it's up to you to adjust the path. Nobody's going to put it in front of you. And so, if you're worried about money, what can you do? Can you, get rid of some of those bills? Can you proactively go get a different job? Can you work 2 jobs? Can you, there's always a decision path. It may never be the one you want. It may not be the one you especially like, but with the discipline needed to do those things, with the positive decision that it takes to get you over that first step and recognize that you can control this, that's mighty powerful, because everything else builds upon that, or at least, I believe that.
Well, I want to take this one step further, Keith, because I have a slight variation. So indulge me, Keith. What do you think your definition of the time value of money means?
Boy, I've got a lot of different definitions, but the time value of money to me is happiness.
That's not what I was expecting. I was expecting maybe compound interest, compound returns. But what I was, and I'll double click on that happiness quotient in a moment, but to me, evolving that phrase of time value of money, converting that into time value of gratitude.
Oh, interesting.
And what I mean by that is your older self perhaps in 10, 20, 30 years, thanks the younger self for the decisions that he or she would make to get the older self not to happen to worry so much about money, about having more freedom and flexibility with your life. So wanted to get your perspective on that, on this hypothesis.
I actually happen to have some thoughts on that. So, I sum it up this way to the folks that we work with and to our clients. You work hard for your money early on, but if you do it right, when you get much older, eventually your money is working hard for you. So the decision you've got to make today is to treat your money with respect, because every dollar you put to work in the markets, every dollar you put aside for your savings, every dollar you do there is a dollar that 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, you're not going to have to work for. In fact, that same dollar may be worth 3, 4, 5, 10, 100, and it's going to be working for you. So yeah, it seems tough right now to put aside the money. Yeah, it seems tough. Maybe you don't get to take that vacation, or maybe you don't get to buy the shiny new car. You don't get to have coffee at Starbucks 5 times a week, or, whatever it is. Literally every penny that you divert as early as possible and leave in the game as long as possible magnifies over time. So that to me is very much the message. If you take care of your money, eventually it will take care of you, but you got to start as early in the game as possible.
How early are we talking about?
The moment you realize it. It doesn't matter whether you're 55 and catching up or whether you're 5 and starting out. If you've got a piggy bank and you're 5 years old, use it, because eventually you can do something with it. If you've got something, you're 55 and you've suddenly woken up and dawned on you that, oh my gosh, you've just spent everything that has come through your fingertips, you still have an opportunity to do something about it. It may not be what you once thought or maybe what you once dreamed, but you still have the opportunity to move forward. And again, to me, it comes down to that dawning realization that I am in control. The first footstep that I take, the first step that I take over that line is the one that I define when I choose at a moment of my choosing. So you can sit back and watch the world go by, or you can go out and grab it by the horns and make it what you want. And I don't think it matters how old you are, how much you have, how little you have, where you come from. It's that recognition of internal power that sets you apart and gets you going forward.
And I hear that. I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, but I am looking at the prism of a high school student who happens to see the struggles his or her parents are going through. What do you say to that? What do you say to them? Because I believe that if the parents don't know, how can they teach the kids?
Well, again, I think that's a matter of, can you find a mentor? Can you do something? But it ultimately, even if you're in high school, still comes from within. For example, in high school, when my friends were out on fancy vacations and buying money and doing all this other stuff, I was working. I was doing home construction. I was doing home improvement. I was a day laborer. I did everything I could because I knew I was going to need that money at some point. And, yeah, I still went out and had a good time, but I wasn't at the beach like my friends were all day. I was busy earning money that I knew I was going to need for my education, that I was going to knew I was going to need to help me get started in my career, that I knew I was going to need down the line. Because I recognized that. My grandmother said, if you're going to want to do all this, you got to put in the effort now. And, I don't believe that the dream is impossible. In fact, I believe that the dream is out there, and the only thing holding you back is the person looking at you in the mirror. So even if you come from a rough spot, even if you come from a different place, if you come from a disadvantaged household or an advantaged household, it's the same decision. The question is, are you going to be in charge of it, or are you going to wait for somebody to put it in front of you? And I would submit that many of the folks that I have known through the course of my life around the world have come from nothing and have achieved great success because they recognize that they take that first step. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a sheep herder in outer Mongolia who suddenly has a flock of his own sheep, and that's all he needs in his world. He's got a wife, he's got 2 children, and he's happy as a clam. On the other hand, I know people who've come from the inner city in Detroit or Chicago projects or New York, and they've gone on and become very, very successful. They don't have any formal education, but you know what? Now they've got a retirement fund. They're sitting down. They're relaxing. They've got wonderful families that they've raised through thick and thin. And on the other end of the spectrum, I know some folks who were born into money, who squandered everything, and now are wondering what the heck they're going to do. But the moment they take that step forward, they're in control. That's the defining factor. If you're going to be humble and thankful and you've got to express with graciousness the gratitude that is going to move you forward.
I had a different take on the role of the parent trying to teach their children about finance, because financial literacy among high school students is not there. Exactly. Do you want to know the stats?
No, the stats are terrible. I mean, just abysmal. And most of them don't understand how an interest rate works. They don't understand the concept of saving. They don't know how an investment works. I mean, our school system has failed an entire generation, several generations, in fact, in terms of basic financial literacy. So again, there is a path forward, but you've got to recognize that maybe this isn't the bargain you signed up for.
Yeah, and the stat that I wanted to pull up was from the Next Gen Personal Finance Organization that said that 22.7% of all high school students are receiving some sort of personal financial education in the classroom. And unfortunately, the situation is worse for lower income and minority students, only 5%. That's more frightening. I mean, these kids, for no fault of their own, are not getting the right life skills to grow, thrive, and succeed. And that concerns me. What can be done?
Well, to me, it's a reform of the educational system, because the idea that these children are going into the world without basic financial literacy is appalling. And I think there's an entire generation of educators that need to be held accountable for it. Now, what that looks like, how that happens, I don't know. I'm not an educational expert. I'm not a political expert. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how any of that happens. But what I do know, again, is that, I've seen plenty of success stories where literally kids have come from nothing and been phenomenally successful in the world because they had the internal drive. And how it got there, I have no idea.
It's hard, though. People give up.
It's very hard. It's impossible because it's easier to give up. The world that we live in presupposes that we're going to give up. Oh, it's going to be okay. We're going to get a participation medal. Everybody can sit down. Oh, wow. That's wonderful. That's not how the world works. That is just not how it works. If you want something, you go after it. This is the world I come from. You want it, go get it, make it happen. You want to be better? Fine, be better. You want to learn more? Learn. Don't sit there and tell me or tell anybody else it just can't go. I mean, it may work for some people, but I really don't believe, and the data backs me up on this, I don't believe that works long term. I don't believe it works in this system. And I think our system has failed. So it needs to. I think we need to have some hard conversations the world over, actually, about how we raise our children, particularly since the financial system, in my view, is predatory to the very people who understand it least.
Did you mention the world or in select cultures and countries?
The world. I think that, again, as our world has become increasingly digitized, as become increasingly global, my sense, again, having traveled very, very widely, is that there's some common human threads there. And one of which is that the world does not accurately teach how complicated finance has become. And I think that it could be a lot simpler and more effective.
Yeah, I guess that'll take a collective effort between governments, institutions, the private sector to change that.
But again, it also takes, and again, maybe I'm completely out in left field here, but it also takes the encouragement that every child needs to understand you can do this. You can do this. And that message isn't being delivered. The entire academic system is set up to fault you if you miss a question. You get marked down. The real world works on success. So, I see lots of young people who want to work in our company, and they come to me and say, "Oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that." What do you mean you can't do that? What do you mean you can't ask for help? What do you mean you can't get? Because the more you ask for help, the more strength you gain, the more knowledge you acquire, the faster you work. You get the conversation at the water cooler, you get the discussion in the conference. There's always an exchange of information. And if you're sitting back on the assumption that you're going to get graded down because you've asked a question, or maybe you didn't ask the right question, or maybe you didn't even have the answer correct, mistakes are tuition. And so, again, I look at this generation of folks and I say, well, wait a minute. How are you going to do this? Well, that starts from the inside. It doesn't come from anywhere else.
That reminds me when I was 16, 17, Keith, my SAT scores after taking it twice, mind you get 200 points for writing your name on the verbal portion and the math portion, so 400. Automatically, you're there. Got a collective score of 890 again after taking it twice. And so I'm like, oh my God, is this how my life is going to be? But I worked hard, right? Made those sacrifices.
I'm right there with you. I'm terrible at standardized tests. I mean, I just am terrible at those things. Never been good at them because I see the world differently. I was the kid that give you A through D. I'd find an exception that should be E.
Oh, there's the entertainment I was looking for, Keith, on this podcast episode.
I mean, seriously, life is too short. I mean, that's the other thing that I think plays a huge role in gratitude, frankly, is humor. We've lost the ability to laugh at ourselves. Everything has become judgmental, or I don't agree with you, therefore you're a word I can't use here, or whatever. I mean, but what happened to humor and entertainment? And oh man, can you believe I was so silly I did that? I mean, it just there's a humility that is inherent in gratitude, I think, and that helps me see the world very differently because I'm going to poke fun at myself. I'm an equal opportunity offender.
Oh, this has been valuable, Keith. Thank you kindly for coming on the program. And going back in my final thoughts on double clicking on the happiness quotient, I think I know one thing that will make you very happy. Unfortunately, I can't deliver that to your doorstep right now. But if you had the choice between Oreo cookies, Mrs. Fields, or the last crumb, what would you like?
Well, first of all, I'd be thankful for any of it.
I know you're cookie aficionados. I did.
Oh,
that's where it's coming from.
I am a cookie monster of the first order. And one of the great joys in my life, my wife is Japanese. We've been married coming up on 30 years now. And funny enough, talking about gratitude and humility, the entire reason we met was because I held the door for her in a restaurant.
Chivalry.
Yes. But I did it because I wanted to, and because it was the right thing to do. And because I knew that, I could have an interesting conversation with her. I didn't know it was going to lead to 30 years of marriage and two wonderful boys that are, grown, interesting young men now. But, cookies, one of the great things she does for me, she takes amazing care of me. I'm extremely thankful, profoundly thankful. But she makes cookies for me every single week. And so I get to munch my way through the week with all kinds of delicacies. And it always puts a smile on my face because I know why they're made. They're made with love. They're made with gratitude. They're made with humility. And it's a way that we share respect for each other. It's how we do that.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, just that common family bond. And final question, Keith, in the moment that we have, is there anything that I didn't ask that it would be important for you to share to the listeners or to the citizens, I would like to say, to the podcast?
Oh my goodness. This is such an important topic. And if it were up to me, the final thought I would leave with everybody is the same one that my grandmother gave to me and planted in my head many, many, many years ago. And that is, the world is bigger than your garage. So get out and explore it and put a smile on your face, because it's going to be a lot easier to do and a lot more fun.
Love it. Keith, thank you for your time. And for those that are listening to this podcast, again, the whole purpose of this enterprise, so to speak, is to help inspire, to help educate, to help entertain. Hopefully you learn something about yourself, or you relearn something about yourself from what Keith shared. Keep those comments coming. I thank you for your time, Keith, and to the citizens of YoggNation. We'll see you next week. Take care.